Court is hearing arguments over the legality of President Trump's sweeping tariffs, and the justice's decision could have major implications for the global economy. Fox's Rebecca Castor has more.
This case before the court could be the most consequential this term, and President Trump is calling it a life-or-death situation for the country. The centerpiece of President Trump's economic policy coming before the Supreme Court Wednesday, as the justices weigh whether he has the authority to use emergency powers to impose worldwide tariffs.
President Trump determined that our exploding trade deficits had brought us to the brink of an economic and national security catastrophe, and that fixing them will make America a strong, financially viable, and respected country again.
The court heard arguments over lawsuits from a dozen Democratic states and several small businesses who say the president's use of a national emergency to issue tariffs is unconstitutional.
This threat that is being posed by the Trump tariffs on small businesses is an existential threat to their ability to survive.
3 lower courts have ruled against the administration setting up this landmark test of the president's executive power.
This case comes down to a very simple question. Can he defend the nation, or does the authority just solely rest with Congress?
If the White House loses here, a lot of President Trump's work securing trade deals could be undone. And the administration may even have to return billions of dollars worth of levies it's collected so far.
President Trump just secured one of the greatest trade deals in the history of our country with Asia and other countries, and he has to be able to do that to protect America.
If the justices rule against the president, he could impose tariffs under other laws, but would face more limitations on how fast he could act. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
New York City elected a new mayor in a race that's drawn eyes from across the country. 34-year-old Democrat Zohran Mamdani was elected the city's new mayor, and he became the first mayoral candidate since 1969 to win more than 1 million votes. Independent candidate and former Governor Andrew Cuomo came in second. Both of them addressed their supporters after the race was called.
You have delivered a mandate for change. For a new kind of politics, a mandate for a city we can afford, and a mandate for a government that delivers exactly that.
And as they start to transition to government, we will all help any way we can because we need our New York City government to work.
Mamdani marks several firsts for New York City. He'll be the city's first Muslim mayor, the first of South Asian heritage, and the first born in Africa. He will also become the city's youngest mayor in more than a century.
California voters had a single issue to decide, and while early on there were concerns they wouldn't engage in a redistricting battle, this morning poll watchers are reporting better than expected turnout in some parts of our state. Let's get into who voted and how by welcoming Mark DiCamillo, the director of the UC Berkeley IGS poll. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
There was a huge push to get to the polls on an issue that most of us haven't really thought about since high school civics class. What do you make of the turnout?
Well, so far, about 8 million votes have been counted. But as you know, California isn't all that quick in counting all the ballots. I suspect, based on historical trends, that there's at least 2 million more ballots to be counted, but we don't know yet. We'll wait and see. We'll hear what the Secretary of State is saying in the next week. But if that's the case, turnout will be, maybe a little less than 50%. Certainly doesn't compare to a presidential election turnout, which is above 70%, but it's kind of on par with what our last statewide gubernatorial election had. So it's a good turnout for a single issue on the ballot, that's for sure.
Did most people vote party line?
Oh, that was one of the biggest findings from our final pre-election poll. In fact, we had over 90% of Democrats voting yes, and over 90% of Republicans voting no. So how you were registered pretty much determined how you were going to vote.
Were there any notable trends you saw in voting along certain demographic or ethnic groups?
Well, the early vote came in kind of as expected, but in a big way, which favored the Democrats. We saw just, they can tell the party registration of the ballots that are sent in early, and it's been tracked on a daily basis. Most of the inside observers were following that. And throughout that entire 2-week period, the Democratic registrants were outnumbering Republican registrants in turning in their ballots by about 25 points. And if you look at the turnout in the actual vote, it's pretty much along those lines. So I think it was a very, very partisan vote. I think the polls did a fairly decent job in tracking the changes. Polls are just snapshots in time of a moving picture. And PPIC had their poll 3 weeks before the election, showing at 56%. We completed our poll at 1 week before the election at 60%, and it looks like it's now at about 64%. So, it was pretty much as expected, but certainly a big win for the governor.
Mark, how soon will we know if there are any voters who live in rural parts of our state who, let's say, dropped it in the mailbox late yesterday, but because they live so far away from an actual, postal center, that vote won't be counted? This is a fairly new issue for us here. Right. Usually if your ballot is postmarked by Election Day, it will be counted within the next 6 days. They're waiting for it to get there. But it has to be postmarked. And so the question becomes, will the post office in those rural areas, have they acted quickly yesterday in putting it together and postmarking it on Election Day? That is the risk, I guess. If it's delayed 1 day, then those votes won't count. So if the person got it in too late, or if it wasn't postmarked on time, does the voter get a notice? How do I know my vote ended up not counting? I think voters are sent a kind of an email or a text that your ballot has been received. I know I received such a text. I think that's what voters should look for. Other than that, I think that's really the only way the Secretary of State and the registrars can notify voters. Got it. Really just that confirmation. Finally, is there such a thing as election fatigue? We have midterms next week. We're coming into a gubernatorial race. We're coming out of, a contentious presidential race. Is there such a thing as, too many elections? No, I don't think so, especially given the state of affairs in American politics. I mean, the people who are supporting President Trump are very strong in their support, and they want to maintain. People who are opposed to what President Trump is doing are very, very strong in their opposition. And so elections are a way to determine which side has the bigger margin. So I think people are looking forward, actually, to the next midterm. You've been doing this for quite a while. Have you seen engagement at this level before? I think every election cycle is different. Again, with turnout roughly below maybe 50% at the most in this election. Nothing quite that unusual. What was unusual was the speed in which they put this on the ballot. It was only there for a 3-month period. Voters had to get up to speed. Our polls and other polls were showing high levels of awareness, and again, a very partisan reaction to the measure. All right, that's our time for now. Mark DiCamillo, we've been reading your work for years. It's nice to connect this way. Director of the UC Berkeley IGS poll. Thank you again.